Welcome to 1 Week Critiques, the interview series. As always, we're here with a writer to discuss one poem or prose piece, an early draft and its later revisions. Today we have Dr. Adrienne Christian, who is a writing assessment specialist. She's also a writer and fine art photographer and the author of 3 collections of poetry: 12023 Woodmont Avenue, out on Willow Lit, A Proper Lover on Main Street Rag, and most recently Worn, out next year on Santa Fe Writers Project. Her prose, poetry, and photographs have been featured really all over the place. I'll let you with some, Adrienne. And Adrienne was awarded the 2007 University of Michigan 5 Under 10 Young Alumni Recognition Award. She was a finalist for the 2016 Rita Dove International Poetry Award. And in 2020, she won the Common Ground Poetry Award for Wedding Dress, which we will be discussing today. Welcome, Adrienne.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I was also just nominated for a push for one of the poems in Woven. So
congratulations.
So it's called The Day I Left the Church.
Oh, okay. I'll recommend that folks buy the book and get into that one. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? What should people know about you?
Sure. Well, you already said that I am Dr. Adrienne Christian. That's exciting because just this past May, I finished my PhD at the University of Nebraska. All my degrees are in English. So with my bachelor's, I got from the University of Michigan. That was English with a concentration in 19th century British literature. My MFA was from Pacific University, and that was English with a concentration in contemporary poetry. And then my PhD from the University of Nebraska just finished this past May. And that was a thing. Thank you. I didn't have a graduation though because COVID stole that. Like COVID has stolen many things, but you know, I feel like, hey, if that's the biggest thing that I have to complain about, then I should consider myself pretty lucky. Yeah. But there at Nebraska, I entered the program with poetry because that's what I had sort of finished with my master's, but there I studied literary prose. So, and I do write in all 3 genres. So I have 3 poetry collections, but I actually now have a nonfiction project and also a fiction project in the works. So I just, I've been a writer since the day I was born, and I'm having a really good time. It's a great job.
Yeah. You said that you, before the interview, you told me you were working on some projects in clothing and fashion. Are your nonfiction, fiction pieces exploring some of that?
Nope, not even close. So my, well, I'll tell you this though, the way that Worn came to be is that I was actually wanting to put together an anthology of poems that all featured clothing. And then working on that anthology, you know, reading those poems about clothes inspired me to write my own. And so that's what I did. And so that's how Worn was born. And then I just kind of scrapped the anthology. So I feel now that was more of a means to an end to get to the collection. So the nonfiction piece is a collection of essays. It's called How I Got Over. And it's essays about how I went from my very difficult childhood, you know, adolescence, young adulthood, to the life that I had now. So my first collection, 12023 Woodmont Avenue, is actually, that's my address of, you know, when I was growing up. And so and I grew up in Detroit, so it's talking about, you know, what life was like in that city and in that home. And so it's not a happy collection. So if you're in a good mood, don't read that one, stay in a good mood. But if you're mad at the world and you want to get even madder, then that's the one to read. But How I Got Over is basically like a blueprint for what I did, how I got from that to the life that I have now, which is actually pretty good. And then the fiction piece It's called A Hopeless Romantic Seeks Filthy Whore.
All right.
Hopeless Romantic Seeks Filthy Whore. And it's about a woman of a certain age who is divorced, doesn't want to be married again, had lots of problems trying to conceive a child, doesn't want to try that again. Is very much into her work, just looking for kind of like a weekend. Can I say the F word on here or no?
Yeah, you can say it.
Okay, so she's looking for a fuckboy. But she ends up finding a husband. So that's what, and he's also 17 years her junior. So she's 40 something, he's 20 something. She never ever meant for anything even remotely close like this to happen to her. But you know, he actually is a really, really makes a really good husband. So that's what that one's about.
Well, speaking of all kinds of questionable material we're going to get into here, I'm hoping that you'll read us one of your earlier versions of Wedding Dress. I'm going to bring it up for the audience here.
Okay. Problem is, I need to be blotted out. My family's DNA. My daddy, the gangster. His mother, the martyr. My mother, the daughter pimper. Her mother, the monster. When I finally met my mother's father and asked how many kids he had, he spit, "What kind of dog go digging around for shit?" My mother's mom was his coworker's wife. I asked my daddy if he was sure I was his firstborn, and he told me emphatically, "I think so. I'm pretty sure you are." His daddy let him use his house to bring his women. Even on Christmas, yes, I distinctly remember one Christmas with young Auntie Deb smiling, unwrapping her shit while my stepmom sat on the basement steps crying in her eggnog. A few of Daddy's prettiest cousins he'd fucked, he admitted. And when I met Uncle Womack's fresh out of the halfway house son, he said, "Come on, cuz, you want something to eat?" He poured us beer and Cheetos on a plastic plate. As we ate, he turned on a porno. I told him, "No, take me home, now." I told my uncle and my dad. They asked, "What were you wearing? Those jeans with the holes in the ass?" This same uncle sewed t-shirts at my half-sister's wedding. "This ain't swag, I'm sick and sore." And dog is God spelled backwards. Half the Hendricks have what they call the sugar. Long gone kidneys and toes, still making pies and drinking. Uncle Kevin gave my daddy a kidney. Daddy still drank and smoked in front of him. I chose the justice of the peace to get married because I know my people aren't worth their $25 a plate. I'd get $5 in a card from 8 of them. My Aunt Sally thought I was marrying rich because my fiance had a business card. She wears every piece of jewelry she owns every single day, all of it worth about $13. But for some reason, my man decides to marry me. He keeps looking at me and can't stop smiling. "Do you solemnly swear you are not brother and sister?" the judge asked us that day in January. Both of us raised our hands. We solemnly swear. My new husband takes me home, and while he's spewing semen inside me, says, "I want to give you a baby." But I'd already gone to my New Orleans aunties and gotten myself fixed to not have kids and not told him. Yes, I knew he'd really wanted to have a family with me. I also knew he didn't know what he was asking.
So let's get the elephant out of the room a little bit. This is a poem that deals with incest, it deals with misogyny, it deals with daughter pimping. There's a lot of uncomfortable family moments in it, like an uncle selling t-shirts at a wedding. That's a bold choice for a poem. It's a bold choice for a book. A bold choice for a public conversation. So why share this piece of all pieces?
Okay, so this poem did just win an award. So that's one of the reasons why I sent it. And then also, it got a big reaction when I workshopped it in grad school. You know, several people in the classroom cried. And that's what I was thinking when I wrote this. I mean, obviously I'm indicting my own family, but I think even more than that, the reason why I felt okay writing this and also talking about it is that, Adam, you know, like with all due respect to everybody's family, oftentimes this is everybody's family. You know, we have, for example, you know, affairs, you know, like a lot of us know that one parent or another is having an affair. And sometimes, you know, kids are even taken around that person and told, this is auntie, you know, but it's really not auntie, it's, you know, mistress. And, you know, it's not, when you think about dowries and parents who want their daughter to marry the man with the most money, I mean, all of that is a form of exploitation. So in writing about my own family, you know, it kind of morphed into, you know, that every person's family. It was difficult to write. They have not seen it. They will. When it comes out. I've been thinking about if I should sort of give some warning. But the thing about it is I love them. You know, I think with any writer, if you, you know, you love your family member enough to put them in the poem. That's what it's about. So you know, I love these people, but the truth is the truth. And what happened, happened. And, you know, like, I think it's better to be honest rather than try and sugarcoat things. And let's hope they don't disown me. And if they do, then I can write the other really, really bad story. This is just the scratching of the surface.
I like that.
And then also, like, kissing cousins, you know, that's the thing. Sometimes, you know, your first kiss is with a family member. Sometimes it's, you know, two cousins who are playing swords in the bathroom, you know what I mean? Two girl cousins who are scissoring. I mean, all these things. And the more I talk to people about these kinds of poems, the more they are willing to say, hey, you know, that happened to me too, Adrienne. And that's why I do this. One of my favorite things about being a poet is when people write to me and say, hey, you changed my life in some way. I was able to think about this, you know, in a different way, or confront this person, or as I like to say, carefront this person, because it's not coming from a place of, you know, hey, I dislike you, but just let's talk about what happened.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I think that's reading through your book. One of the amazing things you do is take on a lot of material in your book, but many things that are extremely difficult in remarkably loving and sensitive ways. One thing I really appreciate that you do is you ask questions of often, and I think that gives me at least an opportunity to think my way into it instead of politicizing it or immediately rejecting it on the basis that I don't want kissing cousins to be a thing, or I don't want selling daughters to be a thing, or many of the other things that happen in this book.
Sure, write that down. Yeah, I mean, like, that's the thing. We don't want it to be a thing, but it is. And I think the more that we hide it, the more it is a thing, you know? Yeah, it's, who is it who said that, like, wounds need air, or, you know, you got to pull that Band-Aid off, and that's how it heals. But if we keep it tucked under that bandage, then I don't know that the healing can really, you know, take place. So.
No, I feel that. So speaking of all the things this book talks about, it's many. I made a small list: family, Blackness, sexuality, academic spaces, your personal love of books, a friend who's very aware that she's less pretty than you or the speaker of that particular poem, romance, an enthusiasm for ball smell, and that poem killed me. The Midwest also, which is the favorite thing of mine as a Midwestern boy.
Oh,
Um,
Adam.
but I think this this poem, I think it's a good guidepost to this book, which your editor Monica Prince, we've been friends for many years now,
Mm-hmm.
and she, when she gave me this book, she told me that she thought it was going to be the first book to be a Netflix series, and um, I think that I'd watch the hell out of it, but I'm hoping for our purposes here, you can tell me a little bit about. So this book starts out with an individual character, an uncle, ironing his shirt, which is a really quiet moment,
Mm-hmm.
and it dives
Mm-hmm.
into this family.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to call it an unfolding because I don't know what else. Panoply, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about why it's here in the book and how it relates to the larger project that Warren has become?
Absolutely. Okay, so one thing I wanted to say is that you mentioned Blackness, and all the characters in the book are Black. So it's a Blackness collection, and they are also, I'm calling them Black love poems. Like you know, the wedding dress. You know, in its own strange way, it's a love poem. It's about, you know, a couple getting married, in the way how when you marry someone, you also marry their family, right?
Yeah.
And you have to think about, you know, do I want to make children with this person, especially like when my husband and I were talking about having kids. I had recently started to trace my family tree. It was difficult to see, like, you know, the like mental illness that I had known about in certain family members, and I thought, oh gosh, I've got it on my side, he's got it on his side, what are we getting ourselves into, you know? So I'll start by saying that, but they are love poems. Even that poem that you're referencing, about my Uncle Steve, is a love poem because, like, we loved him, right? And so you can imagine your big, strong, successful uncle, who is the only Black man at work, who has been the only Black man there for a very long time. One day someone called him the HNIC. I'm not sure if you know what that means. Okay, the head in charge, you know, and he couldn't do anything. Right, he couldn't do, so it was just an overhearing, and he couldn't do anything. And then one day he was just ironing his work shirt, about to go back to work. And then the reason that I spaced the poem out the way that I did is I say one day, Uncle Steve, and because I was putting the emphasis on one, he was the only one there. And you know, I end the poem with January 2nd, because it was difficult to go to work that particular day, having to do this once again. But what made it doubly difficult is it was a new year. So he was going back to work on January 2nd. So that's what I was trying to show with, you know, the white space, between the beginning of the poem and the ending, is to say that it's one thing to have a difficult day, and a difficult day after day after day. It's quite another thing to have a difficult year, and a difficult year after year after year. Not to mention, you know, a lot of the people in your family are rooting for you, counting on you to be the one who is successful, the one who is a bigwig. He worked for Abbott, the one who is the one that we all look up to. That's a lot of weight to carry. And one morning he just couldn't anymore.
So, Adrienne, it's not entirely clear to me if you have multiple speakers in Warren or if you have one speaker in Warren. A lot of the poems are written in the first person. Regardless, I think there are some interesting narrative connections throughout the book. Here, for example, we're dealing with a husband who's eager to have a child. Spewing semen is the way that you put it. Later on, you're going to have a speaker who is titty fucking to give her breasts a purpose again after a miscarriage. Um, I think that there are a lot of these really beautiful little connections and strange, I want to say, re-scenes of the kinds of confrontations and the kinds of sorrows that your speakers have, that make those individual sadnesses, those individual joys, new. And it's almost like looking at a Picasso painting, right? Like, you're not looking at the wine bottle, you're looking at the wine bottle and the wine bottle and the wine bottle and so on and so forth. I'm wondering if that's something that you spend time on in the process of writing, meaning if you sit down and say to yourself, okay, I've got this theme of childbirth, or whether or not I want to have a child, or whether or not this individual wants to have a child out of family experiences that I've had. And then you say, well, what if I take this character and say, what if this person couldn't have a child, or
Okay.
or if that's something that has just emerged as you're looking at your own work and your own poems and as you're crafting a book-length manuscript.
So it was, thank you for noticing that. So it was, what I was trying to show are seasons, because that's what I think a marriage is often. Sometimes you're in the summer of love, and I think other times you're in the winter, right? And not just marriage, but you can go through that with a best friend, with work. Sometimes it's like I love my job, and the other times like I want a new job. So that's what I was trying is to show the seasons in relationships. The poem that you reference, it's called Titty Fucking After the Miscarriage. and I have to say that, like, I can't remember who I was talking to, but someone the other day said that that I write. Oh, did she say I write? She said I write, that I was a sex writer. And I was like, oh! And the poem that she saw was Titty Fucking After the Miscarriage. And I didn't see that as being a sex poem at all. That was a personal experience for me about having had a miscarriage and having to grapple with the fact that even when you've lost, oh God, I'm not gonna get emotional right now.
That's okay.
But even when you have lost a child, your partner is probably going to get over that loss much quicker than you are, because you're a woman. And so, if he still wants to have sex with you, what are you supposed to do? If you still have to do your, wifely duties, if you have to move on from that and not die, what do you do? So it's a season. So on the one hand, we're having a good time and making love in the kitchen, and he's coming in and squatting my bottom, and it's all good. On the other hand, it's like, I don't know if we should have a baby now that I found out these things about your family and mine. And then when you finally decide to have the baby, you lose the baby, and now what? You need to start again. So that's what I mean by seasons. Couples go through seasons together. And I didn't feel like that was a sex poem. Did you feel like it was a sex poem?
No, I think the funny thing about that poem, right, is that titty fucking is a word, right? Like, even sort of writing my notes, I was looking for another way to say that. Right? So I was like, I'm Googling, how do I, like, what's another word for titty fucking? And of course it's like tit wanking, or like really kind of differently pornographic terms, or like non-penetrative sex, right? Like, which wouldn't have worked in that poem at all. But it's very much a poem about sorrow for me, and about managing sorrow, and about, bodily need and desire, and coming to grips with that. I think even in the way that, right, that poem deals with what titty fucking is, right? Like, it's a little mechanical, right? Like, describing the belt and the operation of the thing.
Yeah, because I have small breasts, so it's not like, so I need to kind of go in order to even. Oh, Adam. So I need to, but I tell you, it's really funny. So I wrote that in grad school. Do you know Ted Kuger? He was the poet laureate. Yeah. Okay. So I workshopped that poem with him, and he said, okay, but what is titty fucking? And so I had to describe, and he was just like, kind of like, really? Things like this happen? And I was like, yeah. And then Ted Kuger, yeah, last year. No, this year, earlier this year, actually. And so, you know, yeah, and you ask, so you can ask Google, what's another word for titty fucking? But we don't need another word because it's titty fucking, and we know what that is, you know, and that's like that's it. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. I'm not gonna edit that out. You know, I'm like, this is what it's called, and yeah, and so, but yeah, if a woman's breasts are still full with milk, then now at least, you know, at least she has a use for them.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel you there. I think that's a really beautiful thing that you do in that book, right? Like that you find a lot of sweet moments. One of my favorite poems actually describes, I referenced it earlier, a friend, I assume of yours, who recognizes herself as a less attractive woman. She's trying to pick up a man, and it goes through this, I don't know if courting process is the word, but it ends on, I think I'm going to mess up your line here, but we're all still friends, or something like that. I think those moments really, I don't know, they're often really quiet and independent, and they do all this work in that way, and they face up those troubles in a really direct but delicate manner. I really appreciate it.
So I was very, very surprised by her asking me. You know, like saying, it was almost like I was bait. And you know, sometimes people talk about women being in competition with each other, and you know, never tell another woman that you are, you know, that you think she's pretty, or that you're jealous of her, or whatever. So it was very shocking for for me to be approached that way, with saying, hey, I like him, and the only way he's going to come over here and talk to me is if you are the one who brings him. You know, and so and I really didn't want any parts of that, but I understood, and this is kind of something that ladies do a lot, like kind of make a little trap. Make a little trap for a guy. Like I remember I had a friend who she really liked this guy, so we planned this big party for her birthday, and it was a surprise party, but she knew about it, and it was all to get that guy over there. You know what I'm saying? So not to throw my, you know, fellow homegirls under the bus here, but yeah, so she was like, hey, you know, invite him over, and when he gets here, we're gonna start talking, and then you go act like you've got to make a phone call, okay? And then I'm gonna keep talking to him, and it worked.
What? I'm gonna leave that one alone. So one thing you do that I really like in this book also is you use a lot of different versions of vernacular. You use a lot of different versions of idiom. In Wedding Dress, there's a couple things that I noted you in particular, right? Business card is business card. As you start to edit this poem, you make that vernacular moment clearer. In other places, there are things, right, like the new HNIC that you leave to the reader to, you know, Urban Dictionary or whatever it is, or to experience as it is. And you also, I think, point to things, right, like the sugar, which is an incredible idiom.
That's what people in the Black community call it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And yeah, so I edit it for Google. So like if someone Googled the sugar, they would come up with diabetes.
Yeah.
If they Googled HNIC, they would come up with head, you know, N-word, in charge. If they Googled business card, you know, it would, you know, business card wouldn't come up. So that's why I changed that. So if it were Googleable, then I left it in. And one of the things that I really like to do when I'm reading poetry, when I'm reading anything, I love to be taught something that really makes a poem special to me. So that's something that I like to do too, is teach people something. And like on my social media, I love to be a bridge between you know, other races and Black people. So I'm often posting about the Black experience, Black life, you know, things that are going on and you know, Black society. And I get a lot of feedback from people saying, hey, I never had any idea, like about my hair. Oh my God, Adam, you wouldn't believe. I made one post about how dreadlocks work. I must have gotten like 263 comments. I was like, I thought you guys all knew this, you know? So I love to be a bridge, you know, to teach Black life. And so that's how I edit. Nikki Finney, my professor I told you before, when I was at Cave Canem, she said, Adrienne, be clear. And so it's very important for me to be clear. So that's why I edit it. Or, you know, I said business, as she called it, so that you could understand that it really was business, and that the way that she spoke was was in, you know, what people call Black vernacular. Another thing about that section in the poem, Adam, I have to say is that you know, on the one hand, if you're really educated, you can sort of be a little bit embarrassed by your family members who are not so. On the other hand, though, they can be a really great reminder that you are something. You know, like I do have a business card. You know, my husband does have a business card. I do have an office. I do have a degree. And I think a lot of time, or many of them, I don't even think about those things, but they are always there to remind me that I am dear to them and to the world. They think I'm so amazing because I have a business card. I'm like, oh, you can have one too. You can just print those at Kinko's, you know, but not Kinko's, that's gone. FedEx or Office Depot, you know what I mean.
So I'm almost embarrassed to ask this question, actually, after all the beautiful personal answers that you've given us. I'm really interested in your white space also. I don't have a better transition than that. I think that when I've read your work, right, How to Survive When You're the Only Black in the Office, for example, right, you mentioned setting off just January 2nd on its own. It's a really like profound moment in that way. And I think you do a lot of great work with that white space. I think it's part of how you achieve those effects of getting to something like friendship at the end of this intense narrative. Wedding dress doesn't work like that. It actually, as you've edited it, you've closed it in. It feels a little more claustrophobic is the best word I have for it. I wish I had a more nuanced one. I'm wondering if you can talk about that. I've been thinking about your teachers. You know, as someone who grew up right next to Iowa, Ted Cruz was the only poet anyone knew. And I think he also uses white space, interestingly, but not in that section. Yeah, Kwame Dawes does all kinds of work with white space. I'm wondering, I think both about the choice to make Wedding Dress be more condensed and take up more space on the page, but also
Oh, sure.
gotten some of your ideas about how to use white space and how you've come to use it over time and across your different poems.
Adam, I have to say you asked great questions.
Thank you.
So that's something I did on purpose. So one thing I try to do is make the poem what the thing is. So like if it's a heavy, so I went and edited to make it kind of like a block because it's a heavy topic. So I wanted a heavy form on the page. So I definitely do edit for that. And like other poems that are playful, I tend to kind of be more playful. The poem I wrote, The Hawk, about, you know, the cold weather outside and how it was all up and over around the house. That's why the words and letters are scattered on the page. So that was very perceptive of you. Thank you to notice that I did do that on purpose because I want to make the subject matter match the actual shape of the poem. In my book before this one, A Proper Lover, I have a poem called For Daniel, aka Pencil Dick, and it is laid out on the page as just like a pencil, you know, because we were kind of talking flirty a little bit, and you know, I said something like, "Oh, so you know, tell me about it," and he's like, you know, it's long and skinny like a pencil. So I wrote that, you know. I don't want to get too far off on a tangent here, but I started really thinking about white space a lot when I read this beautiful craft book called Bending Genre. And there is, I want to say, was it Margaret Singer who was the editor? It's got a flamingo on the front with a craning neck, and it was Dinty Moore who wrote an essay in there about white space and how to handle it in your work. And even though it was nonfiction, I just took it and pulled it into my poetry. The other beautiful thing about white space is that it helps the reader read the poem like I want them to. One of the things that a lot of people say about my work is that my voice is powerful. And so I'm very, thank you. And so that I'm very keen to make sure that my voice comes across. So if I'm stressing something, I italicize it. If I'm upset about something, I'll put a exclamation point. And I know some people are like, oh, we don't do exclamation points anymore. But, you know, like I said, with my bachelor's, I studied 19th century British literature. And if Dickens can do an exclamation point, then certainly I can. So I will put that exclamation point in there, Adam. And if I want you to break, then I'm going to give you some white space. So yes, I'm so glad you noticed that, because I did work, like I'm getting chills now. I worked hard on the layout of the work. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's show just the layout. Would you mind reading us the book version of Wedding?
I don't mind at all. Okay. Problem is, I need to be blotted out. My family's DNA. My daddy, the gangster. His mother, the moron. My mother, the daughter pimper. Her mother, the monster. When I finally met my mother's father and asked how many kids he had, he spit. What kind of dog go digging around for shit? My mother's mom was his co-worker's wife. I asked my daddy if he was sure I was his firstborn, and he told me emphatically, I think so. I'm pretty sure you are. His daddy let him use his house to bring his women. Even on Christmas, yes, I distinctly remember one Christmas with young Auntie Deb smiling, unwrapping her shit while my stepmom sat on the basement steps crying in her eggnog. A few of Daddy's prettiest cousins he'd fucked, he admitted. And when I met Uncle Womack's fresh out of the halfway house son, he said, come on, cuz, you want something to eat? He poured us beers and Cheetos on a plastic plate. As we ate, he turned on a porno. I told him, no, take me home, now. I told my uncle and my dad. They asked, what were you wearing? Those jeans with the holes in the ass? This same uncle sold t-shirts at my half-sister's wedding. This ain't swag, I'm sick and sore, and dog is God spelled backwards. Half the Hendricks have what they call the sugar. Long gone kidneys and toes, still making pies and drinking. Uncle Kevin gave my daddy a kidney. Daddy still drank and smoked in front of him. I chose the justice of the peace to wed because I know my people aren't worth their $25 a plate. I'd get $5 in a card from 8 of them. My Aunt Sally thought I was marrying rich because my fiance had a business card, or as she called it, a bitness card. She wears every piece of jewelry she owns every single day, all of it worth about $13. But for some reason, my man decides to marry me. He keeps looking at me and can't stop smiling. Do you solemnly swear you are not brother and sister? The judge asked that day in January. Both of us raised our hands. We solemnly swear. My new husband takes me home, and while he's spewing semen inside me, says, I want to give you a baby. But I'd already gone to my New Orleans aunties and gotten myself fixed to not have kids and not told him. Yes, I knew he'd really wanted to have a family with me. I also knew he didn't know what he was asking.
Right.
So one thing I want to say too is that I feel like at the end of the poem, I, even though I had talked about the ways in which, you know, my family can be embarrassing or less than what I would like them to be, they're still the ones who come through for me. So, you know, when I'm in a pickle, you know, regardless of how uneducated they are, regardless of how, you know, how the things that they've done to hurt me, if ever I'm in trouble, then, you know, that's where I know I can go, so.
I think that's a really beautiful thing. It's a hard one to remember about your family when they're being a pain in your ass. Thank you for sharing that poem with us, and thank you for coming today, Adrienne. Folks who follow us.
Adam, thank you.
Yeah. You can always find us at oneweekcritique.com with the number 1. But where can folks find Adrienne Christian? Where can they hear about dreadlocks and other black world? Where can Netflix get in touch with you, etc.?
Oh, bless you, Adam. You're really great at this. I'm so glad that I've made your acquaintance.
I'm so glad we've met you.
So my website is the best place. It's adriennechristian.com. So that's Adrienne, like Rocky's wife. You remember the movie Rocky? Okay. Hey, yo, Adrienne. So that's Adrienne, yeah, but it's spelled the French way. And then Christian, like a follower of Jesus Christ. So adriennechristian.com. And then there's a contact form if you ever want me to do a reading or something like that. You can send the info there. Also, there are links to all my social media, my Twitter, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. So you can see everything that I'm doing there from my website.
Cool. Thank you so much, Adrienne.
Thank you. This was really one of the best interviews I've ever had. I had a lot of fun. Thank you, Adam.
Great.
Okay. Okay, bye.